Good to go.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us today. I know I considered canceling the meeting. I didn't want to do it last minute though, so thank you all for being here. I know it's a big lift, bigger for some of us than others, but yeah, to start off with, we'll review the agenda and then approve the notes. Hey, Chief. And then, yeah, so everybody had a chance to look over the agenda. I'm hoping if you don't, let me put a link in the chat to everyone. Two policy reviews on today's agenda are going to be the pepper ball policy now that we've seen the devices in action, as well as re-reviewing the handcuffing control and impact weapons policy in preparation for about 5 policies related to the recent mass incidents of protests and riotous behavior, and looking to make sure that some of our older policies are up to date with our current expectations. Does anybody have any comments, concerns, or a motion to approve the agenda?
I will.
Right, got these motion to approve the agenda. We will be doing a vice chair election as well. Does anybody have a second for that? Sorry, I'm a little bit out of it myself.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Jennifer. Everybody in favor, say aye or wave your hand. It's unanimous. Anybody opposed? All right. Now on to the July and August notes. We got a couple of months here because we cut some back to make more time. They're very comprehensive this time around as well. So I'll give everybody a couple minutes to look them over.
So I move we approve the minutes.
Thank you, Silver. Anybody got a second?
I'll second it.
If you second, everybody in favor, say aye or wave your hand.
Right.
Excellent. Anybody opposed? Also unanimous. Excellent. Moving right along. Do we have any public comments? I should have mentioned this earlier. If you have any public comments, raise your hands or yeah, raise your hands in Zoom. I will enable you to talk real quick. The next thing we'll be doing after this is liaison reports. So I think we'll start with Amanda for that, and hopefully Lindsay can join us before we hear Amanda's report. As well as Silver or Macy, do you have anything to report for the ad hoc committee yet? I didn't think so, but.
We haven't even connected with them.
All right, so we're still getting some attendees. So Amanda, if you wouldn't mind, we will start with your liaison report and just do this slightly out of order and put public comment and commissioner comments next.
Okay. My report's pretty short because we haven't met since the previous police commission meeting, so I don't have too much to report, but we did assign 2 folks to the ad hoc committee. We have our chair, Joel Aboya, going to the ad hoc committee, and then also Daniel Borstein, who's on our one of our work groups. He's the lead for one of our work groups, so he will also be going to that. Otherwise, I don't have anything new to report. Like I said, we haven't Human Rights Commission has not met since the last Police Commission meeting where we did our retreat, we set our work plans. That's all being finalized and moving forward, and then we'll be meeting next week. So next time I'll have an update.
Excellent. Excellent. Any of our attendees, if you want to do public comment, just hit the raise hand button, should be down middle center. If not, I think we will move right into commissioner comments. I will start. I saw on Facebook a little while ago a post which seemed, so right by my house, an officer apprehended a suspect, was surrounded by a crowd that was angry. Having it in very close proximity, I tried to follow the incident pretty closely. I saw a Facebook post which seemed to indicate that citizens might get involved to help an officer out in such a situation. I do not feel that the Facebook post had enough clarity to discourage vigilantism, which I think is really important right now, given everything going on. So yeah, that's my one comment for issues that I've seen recently of concern. Other than that, I'd like to echo what I began with, which is thank you all for being here today. Let's do V and then Macy. You're muted, V.
Sorry. So I was saying that I was thinking about our membership on this board and was thinking about how we could, project who we are to the public when they, see our name, or, when they go to the website and look to see who's on this commission. Names really can be deceiving, if that's the right way to put it. For example, you can have somebody who has a last name that, of their spouse, or they, in the marriage, and they change their last name. For example, Jennifer. You would never know who that person is. So I was thinking maybe we could, put a little bio on the website, like 2 or 3 sentences. This is who we are. This is who I am. V-Win. And that way, when the public sees the page, they will be able to at least get some, gather some information about who we are as a commission. We're pretty diverse, but they don't know that if they just look at our names. So I hope that this is something we can consider, as a board. And Jeremy, I don't know if this is something that is, within your pay grade to put together.
I can put that together.
Okay.
That's what you'd like.
Okay.
I think it's a good idea. I get to write V's.
Mars.
Cool. So actually, if nobody has any objections, maybe a 250-word bio that we can each email to Jeremy within the next week or two. And I don't have any professional headshots or anything, so I don't really have a good picture yet, but I'll look for one. And we can each do that.
Thank you.
Thanks, V. Oh, Jeremy?
Just to clarify, so are the pictures, is that what you want included? Some groups have opted not to put pictures out there and they just want the bios. Are you sure that you want the pictures?
I think it's up to each individual if we send in a picture.
Okay.
Unless there's any objections to that. So V, did you have any other comments before we go to Macy?
No, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thanks, V. Macy and then Jennifer.
Hello. Excuse me. So my comment is regarding the homeless population right now and how the city is doing really nothing to help them overnight. Most air safe shelters are only open till 8 p.m. And also Willamette Lane in Springfield had to close due to the hazardous air quality. And so I just want to just acknowledge that we have a whole sector of a population in this town that are really suffering and need some type of intervention. And I'm not sure what that looks like, but I'm interested in trying to find a way to help them more than what is going on right now. That's all I have.
Thanks, Macy. Jennifer, and then Amanda for commissioner comments.
I guess I don't really have any comments. I want to thank V. I think that's a really good idea to kind of let people know we worked, I don't know if we worked hard. We've spent some effort to try to get more diversity on this panel, and luckily a lot of people, came and were willing to apply, and it would be nice to be able to show that in some way. And the names are, if V's right, I am very often, people assume I am Asian until I show up, or even after I show up. And so, yeah, I think that's nice to show some transparency and it hopefully encourage folks to feel more comfortable to apply.
Thanks, Jennifer. Amanda, and then Chantel.
Yeah, so I don't have much in the way of comments. I really appreciate what Macy had to say, though. I was going to say something along those lines. So I would just second everything that she said. I think that that's a huge, huge issue right now. It is so unhealthy out there. Yeah, I think that's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Amanda. Chantel, and then Dallas.
I guess I would just like to say I'm glad to see everybody here and everybody's safe. It's been a real big struggle. One of my facilities that I work out actually had to evacuate. They're out on Marcola Road. So I've been working on evacuating kids to our other facility all day, which has been really scary. Also been working on delivering water to the community and just basic needs, especially like Macy said, to the homeless population. So yeah, just trying to figure out ways to help the community right now.
Thanks, Chantel. Dallas, and then Silver.
I want to go back to the bio with the picture. I would just say that either we do the picture or we do all bio. It shouldn't be some are doing pictures and some are not. So I would. Are you getting what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I think that would take a vote. Does anybody have any objections to having their picture included in Silver? Macy, yeah. So let's not do picture then, just to keep it consistent.
Second, I have an email that I will forward to you, Sean and Jeremy,
okay,
where I believe, and I don't have the name in front of me because I just don't have it, it's someone who's in charge of Cahoots, where they were kind of reaching out for some type of dialogue, some type of conversation. So I will forward to you what was sent to me. It was nothing more than like a reaching out. We would love to chat with you, so forth. And that's all I have for now.
Excellent. Thanks, Dallas. I've seen a few emails come across my desk asking for participation in a University of Oregon study. I want to clarify here that as individuals, you can all have comments on things. If we want to speak as the commission, I will generally, unless it's an emergency, come and ask you all for authorizations or for directions in speaking for the commission. But we can all give our personal feedback in any way we deem fit, as long as we're clear about that. So thank you, Dallas. I look forward to seeing that. Silver, and then Alan.
Yeah, so echoing what Macy said And I think it's something that a lot of us are focused on right now. My heart is so heavy with the thought that there are people that are living on the streets right now in the mess that we are all dealing with. Some of the worst air in the nation was in Eugene the other night, and it's here, it's nearby, it's Cottage Grove, it's Eugene. And I cannot imagine the horrors that those people are facing right now. And on top of that, the people that have lost their lives, the people that are losing just so much in these areas that are affected. I'm grateful for the responses that we have been able to have, and that there are people that are helping and going out and taking part in relief efforts. So I applaud those efforts, and I wish there was something that we could do to help out the homeless population that are unhoused at this point.
Thanks, Silver. Alan and then Bonnie.
Yeah. Actually, yesterday, there's a website called Purple Air. If you go to it, it shows pollution all over the world. And yesterday, when I looked at it, right here in our area, we had the worst PM 2.5 particulate matter, fine particulate matter. We were the worst, most polluted place on the planet. It wasn't just in Oregon, it was everywhere in the world. This is the hot spot for PM10. So it is a critically important issue for everybody. You know, the scale goes up to 500, which is severely unhealthy, and we were about 700 and something. So it's gotten better since down the 400s, but makes you kind of think about what's really important. You know, it wasn't bad enough that we had the pandemic, then we layered on top of this wildfires and threats to our families and communities. So it really makes you take stock of what is important, and that is our well-being and our families' well-being and our homes, and making sure that we are safe and secure, and that allows us then to go off and do the work that we're doing at this commission and things like that. So those are the most important things. And so along those lines, if you haven't already, go to the Lane County Emergency Management website and sign up for the alerts. Because if you don't automatically get the alerts on your phone, but if you sign up for it, you will, and they're critically important, especially in the outlying areas in this time. So everybody should sign up for that and get that on their phone if they have a phone. And then finally, I just wanted to thank all the folks that have been working on this day and night for the last several days. The firefighters putting themselves at risk, and also the amount of hard work that they're doing, because it's really, truly an amazing job that they're doing, and trying to keep the fire spreading to the minimal perimeter that we possibly can get. But there's also been so many people that have lost so much already. So my heart goes out to them, but thanks to all the firefighters and all the support staff that's doing all that work. And our firefighters in Eugene are all over there working on this as well. So we've got many battalions over there, but we're also keeping coverage within the city so we can respond. But it's a tough thing. And I think the police, I heard that we needed probably about 1,000 people to work on the fire up to Mackenzie, and we had about 200. And it's not that there isn't enough people, it's just that there's too many fires and they're spread out all over the place. So we're doing what we can with the resource that we have, and it's gonna end soon, and hopefully the air quality will get better as well. But it's gonna be here for a while.
Thanks, Alan. Bonnie? You are muted, yeah.
I apologize for being late. I'm not sure what we're doing. Kind of just sounds like general statements. So I guess I will make a general statement. Also, I'd like to echo what Macy said. Well said. And also just, I was looking up the wildfire fighters, and I was looking into a company here in town, and they said that they pay firefighters a range between $17 and $18, and what was it? So it was like $12 base pay, and then they have $5 hazard pay. But then once they go into overtime, for some reason their hazard pay goes away, and then they get paid, you know, 1 plus halftime or whatever, however you pronounce that or say that. So really the range is always just $17 to $18, which to me doesn't really make any sense, because if you have, I mean, there's still a hazard, so there's no reason for you to go into overtime and then also just get your hazard pay taken away so that you only make it $1 in addition to that. So I feel like that's such a ripoff for the people that are risking their lives for us to protect our property and our forests. So I'm just saying, I'm like, I don't really know where to have this addressed, but it's sort of aggravating and I don't like it. And that's the conclusion of that statement. And I also have stuff to say about the stuff that is on the agenda, but I don't know if that's what we're doing right now. But
we're doing commissioner comments right now. We
Okay.
will go over each item on the agenda, where I'm
Okay.
very much looking
Okay.
forward to your comments.
Sorry about that. Okay, thanks.
Of course. Sweet. So as we head into Chief's report, I also want to open it up to Kyle and Naivasha. Had to find your face there real quick. Naivasha, if you have any comments or concerns before we head on. Seeing no, Kyle might be frozen. Oh no, there he is.
I'm glad everybody's here tonight and is relatively safe, and I hope everyone stays safe out there.
Sweet. Thanks, Naivasha.
Yeah, I've just got a similar sentiment that as if we needed one more catastrophic event in our lives to add to our already stressful times that we've been in right now, that I appreciate everyone taking the time and continuing to show up and to be available here tonight. I know we've probably all got other places that we'd like to be and family and friends to attend to. So appreciate you guys being here so we can keep the progress moving forward.
Thanks, Kyle. Still seeing no public comments, so I'm going to assume there are none for today and move on to Chief Skinner. Yeah, welcome.
Thank you. First of all, I want to apologize for not being here last time. I was on vacation with my family, and I'm going to further apologize because I'm also going to duck out early tonight because it's my little girl's 11th birthday tonight, and the family is at dinner, and I stayed behind so I could spend some time with you, and want to just welcome the new members of the commission. We're super excited just to have you, and I know that it feels like there's a little bit of a learning curve, and you have a ton that you want to accomplish, I'm sure, and are still trying to find your bearings on how you can accomplish that. And just know that we can absolutely make space for you to really do a deep dive, and that I'm always available. And Jeremy is in my office, always available if we need some extra time together, just around some orientation. I'm happy to make myself available for that. So just know that. Kyle's sentiments, I think, are felt by a lot of people. I can't wait for 2020 to be done at this point. You know, between the pandemic and really embracing police reform and some of the social unrest that we're seeing now, these wildfires, and then the overarching thing that we will deal with from now through this year is just the financial challenges that we have in the city to continue to provide services with a significantly reduced budget, and in the police department as well. And so we're trying to kind of stick the landing on all of those, and it just feels overwhelming at times, and sometimes it feels a little bit hopeless. But I will say that I do think there's some tremendous opportunity in this crisis to come together and actually do some really good things. I'm looking forward to the ad hoc committee and that getting going and seeing how we can be of service through some support or research or analytics, and also looking forward to the workshops with the community safety initiative. The piece of what I love about being a chief is the ability to kind of tap into the creative side, you know, kind of the right side of my brain on how we do things differently. And we're starting down that path already. And tonight's a good example of that. Is the policies that you'll see tonight, or that you're going to talk about tonight, are policies I specifically asked for the commission to take a look at. And in one case, pepperball policy, it's a fairly recent policy that's been vetted by the police commission. And some of the other policies are quite old. I think six years old. 2014 is the other one that has since it's been updated. But the interesting part about these policies, and especially the pepperball policy, is I think that what I'm asking is that we're looking at it through a different lens now. And you know, we have enjoyed good fortune here in Eugene of not having to deal with the level of protests and some of the violent and destructive behavior that we've seen. And so when you don't deal with things often, you generally aren't very good at dealing with them. And so looking at it through that lens gives us an opportunity to see what about this application worked, what didn't it work, what should be in that policy, what shouldn't be in that policy with regards to the use of pepperball and some of the others. And so I'm just looking forward to just some thoughtful feedback and direction around that policy and those types of things. Sean, I appreciate your point about vigilantism. We do not support that or condone that. As a matter of fact, in almost every indication that we would see in our intelligence that counter protesters were going to show up, we tried to reach out to them and ask them to not, they are not value added, they're not helping matters, and we don't mind communicating that. But it is a matter of context, and I will tell you, I am the beneficiary as a young deputy of a Good Samaritan that stopped as I was fighting in the middle of a highway with an individual that stopped to help me. And so I think given the right context, there are some people that would stop and help an officer if they saw the officer was in a bad place. And as much as I thought I could take care of myself, I was in a pretty bad place that night until somebody stopped to help me out. So again, it's a matter of context. So I appreciate your comments about doing that. We are working on what it looks like to match resource with need. One of the things that's really exciting right now is really working the police department in shifting away from camping and car camping enforcement and moving the police department away from being the first response to those. One example is because parking is almost non-existent in downtown, we've shifted almost all of our outreach to car camping and to a completely different team that's outside of the police department. And so I think that's an example of trying to match a different resource with a need. And so I think that is a really good direction for us to go in. We're getting officers trained right now and starting to move towards a start date, hopefully in October, where we're going to be reporting not only our uses of force, but our show of force for the first time ever, and having officers report that so that we can make sure that even our showing of our force is not disproportionately affecting members of our community. And so I'm excited about that level of reform around use of force, and we'll get really good analytics around that. And we'll be able to capture that, much like we do with our stops data, to see what our officers are doing with their discretionary time. And so I think there's some really encouraging things that are happening there. And all of this is happening while we're dealing and trying to support as many as 12 to 15 families that have been completely evacuated, and some have lost their homes, that are members of our EPD family, and the broader city is trying to see how we can support our employees. As we know, I think the last count was as many as 100 or more people that have been evacuated or displaced. And so, all of that stuff kind of comes to a head and competes for our time and competes for our emotions. And so we're trying to be mindful of how do we stay healthy, how do we stay mindful, how do we stay engaged. One of the first things that goes when people are under this amount of cumulative stress with all of these traumas is our ability to show empathy. Our capacity for empathy, our capacity for compassion has a tendency to to diminish. And so we're trying to be front of mind about that and how we stay resilient, because police officers are still asked to make good decisions out there, and I want them healthy so they can make the very best decisions they can, stay engaged and stay compassionate about the work that they do. And so I'm trying to be mindful about that. So just a lot of moving parts right now. And again, welcome to the new commissioners, and I look forward to being able to work closely with you. So thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Chief. Anybody have any questions for Chief before we move on? Alan?
Yeah, Chief, this came up at a neighborhood meeting. What's the difference between parking and camping? There were some RVs that have been parked in front of people's homes, and they call to say these people are illegally parking, and they say, well, if there are people in it, then it's a camping violation, and so not sure who to call and what to do about that circumstance. And where would we send them once we respond?
Yeah, they are different, even though they don't necessarily feel different. The camping ordinance that we have now doesn't address vehicles or people that are staying in vehicles. The car camping situation is handled completely different, and is actually handled through a contract with St. Vincent's around some notifications, different levels of requirements that we have to meet around notifications and the amount of time people are given to move, much like kind of an abandoned vehicle where it's given notice and it's given X amount of time. I don't know if it's 48 hours or 72 hours or what it is. But St. Vincent de Paul, we have a contract with them where most, if not all, the car camping complaints go through them to be able to do some level of outreach to see if we can get them moved to some place that is out of a residential area or off of private property, because we see both. We see some that are parking in parking lots on private property, some that are in residential areas, and trying to get them to some designated car camping sites. And so the new parking, and I don't even know what we're calling them. It's the former parking officers have created this kind of car camping outreach team. They're starting to do all of that work now, because what we found is St. Vincent's was able to do about a quarter of the requests, and so many of them just sat idle and did nothing, or they just couldn't get to them in a timely fashion. And now we have some staff that is able to do that. So without seeing the two ordinances side by side, I wouldn't be able to answer specific questions, but for whatever reason, the car camping is seen differently than camping when it comes to notifications and the amount of time people are given to be able to move. Now, the regular camping stuff, we've been really good about not immediately removing where we're practical, unless it's on private property, and giving people 24 to 48 and sometimes 72 hours if it's over a weekend to be able to move.
Mm-hmm. So should people call EPD or parking?
Yeah, don't call EPD. Yeah, we're trying to move that. We're trying to move away from that.
Parking.
I'll have to find out. I'll have to find out what the number is for the intake for the car camping. But it's in PDD now, not EPD. So Denny Burrow is the director there, and he's the one that's got those folks and standing those up. And we've diverted some money from our budget to be able to stand up that team, and we see it as a pilot right now because we know parking is going to come back someday. We see it as a pilot, but we also see it as an opportunity to see if it's going to be successful, because we want to, I think my thought was we build it into part of the capacity for the community safety initiative, because that's exactly what we should be doing, is finding alternatives to enforcement.
Yeah, right. Well, if you get us that number, that'd be great.
Sure,
I'll get
it to you, sir.
Thanks. I have another question, but I can go at the end of the line.
Let's give anybody else who might have a question a chance, and then we'll come back to you, Alan. Silver, and then Dallas.
So I saw just before our meeting today that Scoburg Park had a number of unhoused that were removed. I don't know if there were citations given, but given that the city hasn't set up any place for people to be at this point in time. I understand that's a small park. I've been to that park. Is there any way that we can not make those kinds of have those kinds of actions at this point?
Yeah, Silver, we've tried not to. That one was specifically as a result of a ton of complaints, neighborhood complaints around a variety of behaviors, to include fights in the middle of the night. That was really disruptive there, and so we've tried to be mindful and thoughtful about where we go in. And I don't know if any citations were given. I doubt there were any enforcement action was taken other than just to try and break up. That group was getting pretty big. Some of the complaints were just around the lack of social distancing and the lack of masks. But what finally got, and we've been going out and trying to educate people about that a lot lately. The governor has asked us to be more mindful of that. I've tried to meet her needs with the available resources I have. In this particular case, we had some other just really disruptive behavior for that neighborhood specifically, and so we were trying to be responsive to those neighbors that were calling us.
And regarding the waste issue, if say there was a community group that put together some funds to get like a honey bucket or something like that, and there's a group that's unhoused, being respectful and not having, the kind of interactions that you were talking about, would it be okay for somebody to set up a honey bucket for those unhoused communities?
Well, we certainly try to do that and have done that for a long time. Try to strategically locate not only trash facility, dumpsters for trash, but also for porta potties to be used. And specifically in the Whitaker, we've had those strategically located around there. We've had some success with those, and in other cases, we've had it be a place for illicit behavior, and so we've had the Whitaker ask us to remove them. And so it's kind of a moving target, and with respect to whether it's successful or not, and it really depends on the group. I don't specifically know the answer to your question. If you can kind of privately pull together an initiative and put a honey bucket or a porta potty out, you would have to, I guess, be mindful of where you're putting it at. If it's on city right away, you'd have to have the city permission. If it's on private property, whoever the private property owner's permission would be granted. But there's probably a path forward there. I just don't have a specific answer for you on that, Silver. I apologize.
That's okay. I mean, it's just, we're all trying to get through this, and
right,
thinking of the best possible scenario for those of us that are kind of trying to do things in the
Thanks, Silver. Dallas, and then we'll jump back to Alan if anybody else has another question, or I'll get Bonnie after Alan.
Okay, my first question is, when you're talking about the unhoused, and then you're talking about, and Alan mentioned that there was a community meeting that he attended. So my question is the gist of that community that they did not want those folk on their property or in front of their homes?
Neighborhood meeting. The latter.
So the people were camped out in front of their houses or on their property?
I think the latter. Or there was parked on the street. RV parked in the street.
So my first question is an RV allowed to park on the street in front of a person's house?
The RV, if it's a legal place to park, the RV can be there, but you cannot park an RV and not have it move. It can't be just parked and left there without being moved for a certain amount of time. And I don't know exactly, Mr. Boggs, I don't know exactly what that amount of time is, but it kind of falls under kind of the abandoned vehicle rule where you have a car that just sits there inoperable for a certain amount of time. So that's my guess is that's part of what's going on. It's not that the RV shows up and then leaves, but the RV shows up and then is there for days or weeks on end.
Yeah, and that was the case in this one where it was just sitting there. Nobody was going in and out of it. Nobody knew why it was there and why. And they couldn't tell.
Storage on the
I think
street.
Sergeant Williams has an answer as well.
Yeah, storage on the street is 72 hours. So if a vehicle's left on the public right of way for 72 hours, it can be towed as an abandoned vehicle. So that's where you see, even along the highways, you see the bright orange and yellow stickers on the vehicles, and that same rule applies in the city of Eugene as it does for most of our public thoroughways.
So then my next question is, when you say that vehicle is going to be towed away, is that towed away with the people inside, or they have to be outside of it?
Yeah, we won't tow vehicles with people inside. That's where St. Vincent de Paul comes into play, that nothing is towed unless it's completely abandoned. We're finding it more and more difficult to find towing companies actually tow these vehicles off the street, quite frankly, because they get towed and then they don't get claimed, and then they don't have anything to do with the vehicles. But that's where St. Vincent de Paul or now this new team comes into play, is to be able to kind of liaison with anybody that might be in the vehicle.
And then last but not least, is this type of activity predominantly in a certain part of town? Because I heard mention of the Whitaker.
It's all over the city. We've got, there's very few areas of the city that don't have some level of car camping that's happening. Out west, it's really, really bad. Whitaker, we see it. We see it in the downtown core, up in the friendly neighborhoods, West Jefferson neighborhood. It's in a lot of different neighborhoods. So we see that as a citywide issue.
I think Naivasha had one thing to add as well, and then we'll move on to Alan and then Bonnie.
Yeah, you let the real cop tell you how this goes.
I just wanted to provide clarification on the parking component of things. So they're issued a 72-hour notice if an officer arrives and nobody's within it, and it's been deemed and probably looks, pretty abandoned. So it gets a 72-hour notice, and then it gets another 72-hour notice once we have to follow up on it. So in total, you're looking at about 6 days. So for the parking, only the parking component of things.
Thanks. So we've got Alan and then Bonnie, and then if anybody who hasn't asked a question has one, we got time for probably one more after that.
Bonnie can go before me.
Okay. Awesome.
Thanks. Chief, you said that people were actually going out to that site that Silver was talking about, and I guess they were educating people about social distancing, and also there was a fight going on. I'm not sure if this is the same event, but my question is, do you know why they weren't social distancing, or what about their community makes it so that they don't social distance? And I have a follow-up.
Yeah, so I don't know the details, Bonnie. What I know is that, again, we got several different types of complaints from community members. Some of them were more focused on the lack of social distancing and no masks amongst that community, people that were in the park or in that Scobrook area. Many more were more concerned about some of the other illicit behavior that was happening, some of the what they call destructive behavior and fights. So it was kind of a mix. In general, what we've been trying to do, if the complaint was just about social distancing or just about mask wearing, what we've been trying to do is just be an education only type of, with all of our spare time, which is almost none, being able to just have conversations and just, friendly reminder that we're trying to all do our part to slow the pandemic down.
What is the form of the intervention when a fight happens, especially in those kind of communities? I've heard them myself in the evenings back when I lived near the Lane County Fairgrounds, and there was a camp there, and I could hear them yelling at night. It didn't bother me so much because I was just like, well, they're gonna do what they're gonna do, whatever. Anyway, but my point is that what kind of intervention happens when yelling happens? It's almost like a domestic dispute, but it's outside in public. So I'm just kind of wondering.
As far as from a police perspective, what kind of intervention?
Yes, and whether or not maybe it might be something that Cahoots, I don't know the
Yeah.
extent of what Cahoots does, but maybe it might be more
Yeah.
appropriate for them to step in, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, we generally speaking, in a disturbance like that would not get dispatched or go. It would not rise to the level of a response from us, especially competing with all the other priority responses that we have. Cahoots could be a resource there, but we're also really careful about not asking Cahoots to go in and be an enforcement arm of or be seen as enforcing anything. And so the fact that people are fighting, Cahoots might not be the right resource. We're really careful about keeping them away from even any perception that they would be there because any enforcement needs to happen. But there are other situations where there might be a dynamic in a camp like that where Cahoots might be the appropriate response. And we try to do a really good job of drilling down on what those circumstances are and then dispatching the appropriate response. But all of these complaints were never, as far as I can tell, were never kind of spur of the moment 911 calls, hey, somebody's fighting. This is just accumulation of days and days and days of people experiencing this type of behavior in their neighborhood, feeling nervous about that, feeling like it was getting out of control and asking us to come and have that conversation with them.
Oh, okay, so you did have a conversation, and did the conversation by chance, well, I don't want to lead you, but I do want to ask because I want to get right to the point. So did the conversation ever entail saying, listen, you can't keep fighting because you're disturbing the neighbors. I want you to be able to stay here, but if you fight, then I'm going to be you're going to force my hand to move, and I really don't, like, I don't know that you have anywhere else to go. Like, did the conversation ever kind of go like that? Sorry, I just wonder.
Well, you're asking me to be able to, and I'm not going to be able to tell you how the conversation went because
Sorry,
that's not.
I don't know.
That's okay. That's okay. It's as the chief of police with 350 employees, it's going to be tough for me to always know exactly how that went down. Here's what I will tell you though, is that if you have some interest on this, one of my jobs is to make sure you get the information you need. And so I'm happy because we do generate a call. And we do generate notes about the call. And so I can get you that information and I'm happy to do that.
That would be great. Thank you. Yes. How do I follow up on that? Just like email you or something?
Well, you know what? We've got a really, really bright individual listening to this call named Jeremy, and he is going to take care of you and we'll make sure that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. So let's do Chantel and then finish up with Alan. Sorry, Alan.
Hi, Chief. I just have one question. So after they're given the 72-hour notice on their vehicles, are they given another location to go? Because you're saying they're fighting and doing all of these things. Like, what stops them from going to a different neighborhood and doing the same things? And then they get kicked out from that neighborhood? Like, is it a cycle or?
Chantel, I will tell you that they absolutely show up in other neighborhoods, in other areas. From the moment I've gotten here, and both Counselor Zelenka and Counselor Ye will tell you that one of the things that I've often been heard saying is, if you're going to ask me to tell somebody that you can't be here, we've been asking for where can they go? Give me some place they can go. And I know that we're working on that as a city. We're working on an inventory of either car camping locations, designated car camping locations. I know we've talked about closing down right-of-ways to allow for that. There has been some discussion about what parks might make sense for that, emergency shelter for those that are tent camping, those types of things. And so it's not a good outcome because oftentimes there is an inventory for us to be able to show up and say, hey, you've kind of worn out your welcome here. This isn't a great place for you to be. The neighbors are struggling with your behavior. Here's where you can go. We don't have the here's where you can go part of that conversation yet. I'm hopeful though that whether it's the continued implementation of the tax study or the reimagining of some of the CSI dollars, I'm hoping that we can start building that inventory so that we can start doing that. However, my focus is that it shouldn't necessarily be a police officer that's having that conversation with somebody. There's ways for us to have that conversation through other resources for those needs. And that's really what I want to work on, is getting police officers out of the business of being the ones that have to show up and have those conversations. And not 100% of the time, I won't be able to do that, but it's time for us to start reallocating, again, the correct resource with that particular need.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Alan, to the last question.
Yeah, just to be clear, the 72-hour notice is for abandoned vehicles. And another thing to be clear about is there is no camping in parks, especially developed parks. We're looking at other places that are undeveloped potentially, but no camping in parks because they're just not built to withstand camping and the amount of use that gets. So it becomes a very expensive place to have people camp if it needs to be repaired. So, Chief, just to clarify something that you said, we stopped doing citations for camping during the pandemic. We recently, and maybe you know when we restarted that, but we don't just issue every single person we find camping illegally a citation. Maybe you can help us understand a little bit better about how you're treating that policy.
So yeah, thank you, sir. So we went through a fairly, as we rolled into the pandemic, we got into a pretty good practice of placing a moratorium, for lack of a better word, on enforcing the camping. Now, having said that as well, we also had some instances where people were camping on people's private property, and we had people calling us as victims of trespass, and we had to deal with those. And so we did that. And remember that the planter strip between the vertical curb and the sidewalk is governed, for lack of a better term, or given the authority by the adjacent property owner, whether that's a private residence or a business, to determine whether somebody can be there or not. And in some cases, people didn't want others camping on their planter strip, and so they called us, and we would enforce that. But as it pertains to many of our parks where we had camping starting to occur, we did suspend an awful lot of that unless there was a public safety hazard or a public health hazard. And so in a couple of instances, we saw some of the camps grow to a size and engage in some behavior. I'll use one of the camps out by Coastal Farm as a good example of that. Mm-hmm. That camp was involved, and stolen property was found throughout that camp after a significant burglary of Coastal Farm to the extent of about $7,500. That's a great example of the types of criminal behavior that would occur that would get us engaged. And we had a few of those over the pandemic. Since then, since we've been kind of in various phases, whether it's phase 1 or phase 2 that we're in now, we've tried to have kind of a soft rollout of trying to regain some control over those public open spaces. And so parks and open space has really taken the lead on any cleanup, and it's either been anchored to environmental cleanup. We've really tried to focus back in our parks and get people back out of our parks, as you alluded to. Camping is a violation of park rules. People want to use the parks, especially during the pandemic. We heard over and over from people that were not comfortable using the parks with a certain number of campers in there. And so we've tried to be really thoughtful about that, but we've really tried to divert attention to parks and open space to really drive that for us. And we would just really get engaged only if we were having a problem with compliance around moving somebody along. But we have not had to issue many citations, if any at all, or make any arrests that I'm aware of in the last several months. And I'm sure there has been, onesie twosie, but not to the extent that people think that we're just going in and sweeps and anybody that's here is getting a citation. Enforcement needs to be a last alternative for us, and we gain an awful lot of voluntary compliance most of the time.
Great, thanks, Chief. Actually, that wasn't my question. And this is probably a good segue into some of the stuff we're going to do later in the agenda. In your mind, Chief, what's the role of the police commission and the role of the ad hoc committee? Because it seems like there's a lot of overlap in what's going to be going on between the two things. But maybe you can help clarify what we're going to be doing and what they're going to be doing and how we're overlapping.
I've given that some thought because it does seem that there is some overlap there. It's my understanding that the ad hoc committee and I think Jennifer, Counselor Ye and Counselor Evans have maybe a little bit more sense of this. It's my understanding that the ad hoc committee is going to specifically focus and try to narrowly focus on the Campaign Zero initiatives, and with respect to how EPD is doing, and or make recommendations about how we can adjust policy procedure to better hit the mark as it pertains to the Campaign Zero. And there's a variety of those. That's where the 8 Can't Wait came out of the Campaign Zero. It's a little bit, I don't know what we'd consider dated. I think it was a study that was done back in 2015, maybe published in 2016. So it's about 4 years old now, but there's still some things in there that are, I think, worth looking at. And I think there's some things in there that EPD and public safety here has landed pretty close, if not right on the mark with some of those. So that would be the difference. I would see the ad hoc group being specifically focused on the Campaign Zero. And I would see our police commission continuing to take a look at like what you're going to be doing tonight is looking at, hey, when we looked at the pepper ball policy not so long ago, it made perfect sense then based on the lens we were looking at it. But now we have a new set of experiences. And so what needs to change through our new set of experiences, and continue to ask the police commission to move us forward looking at all of those things. And I would just say that in my last comment is that, you know, the police commission, when we talk about policy and procedures, you know, the real meat on the bone is maybe policies that I'm bringing to you now, but we have an awful lot of other policies that need attention that maybe aren't as attractive in this given time. And we don't want to lose sight of the importance of those as well. And so there's going to be an awful lot of those that just don't feel like they fit in this kind of landscape right now. But in the totality of what we're trying to build, which is a really trustworthy and legitimate police department, we have to take a look at those as well.
Thanks, Chief. The other thing that the committee is going to look at is the Obama administration 21st Century Policing Report as well. But thanks.
So just before you go, if this is just a clarification, part of the policies that we're looking at this evening have to do with holds. And I've heard you publicly say that we will not do strangleholds or chokeholds anymore. It's not specifically stated in the policy, but is that something that we're moving away from? Because that is a part of the campaign initiative.
So we removed that policy altogether. So I mean, we just removed it altogether. So you know, I think we need to be careful about building a policy that just articulates everything we're not going to do. And what we did is we very quickly evaluated the fact that the carotid restraint was in our policy. We very quickly evaluated that we don't train on it very often. And in the last 12 years, it's been used once. It was used once, and it was used ineffectively, and the officer recognized it was ineffective and discontinued it. And so if it's something that's not contemporary for us to even be training on and using and offering as a solution to our officers, then there's no need for it to be in our policy at all. And so that's kind of where we're at now. Now, having said that, the tough discussion is that if lethal force is authorized, and I've been in situations like this, and other police officers can tell stories. If lethal force is authorized and you're trying to save your own life or the life of others, there are an awful lot of things at your disposal that you might come up with to do that. You know, a street fight is a street fight. You know, that's the tough part, is that, you know, I can't tell you that there's never, ever going to be a time where an officer's arms don't go around somebody's neck. But what I can tell you is that that is not going to be something that we're going to teach our officers to rely on, much like we do many of the other techniques or many of the other things that we train on. But history has shown us that it's just not effective. And so it's been removed.
So EPD will not use carotid or chokeholds or strangleholds as part of the policy.
EPD does not train on or endorse the use of the carotid restraint.
Okay.
I will also take this opportunity. Thank you, Chief, for joining us for so long. I will also take this opportunity to say that of all the policies we create, it's not possible for the chief to say none of them will ever be violated. In fact, the reason we have the auditor and the civilian review board is because on occasion things happen in gray areas or explicitly against policy. So thank you for removing the carotid hold as a trained or authorized use of force. And happy birthday to your daughter.
Well, I appreciate it. And again, I apologize. You're in good hands with Kyle and Navasha, though, as you walk through those policies. I need you to work Kyle over a little bit, because we're going to probably be losing him in the next 4 to 6 months. And so make sure you put him to work. And I really think a lot of good work can happen in the not so distant future. I'm very, very anxious and motivated to get some work done. And that's why the revamping of the use of force to start capturing every time we point a taser at somebody, every time we point a gun at somebody, every time we point 40 millimeter extended range impact weapon at somebody, every time we point a pepper ball gun at somebody, we're going to start capturing that data. And that's never been done before. And so it feels like a big lift, but it's the right lift. And so those are the types of things I think we can accomplish together.
Thanks, Chief. So moving on to the pepper ball policy. I take it everybody has read this. I was planning on starting with Lindsay to see if she'd gone through the civilian review board and if they had any thoughts or concerns off of it. Starting off, we, as Kyle mentioned, reviewed this fairly recently. So I just want to open the floor to anybody who has thoughts on the existing pepper ball policy, questions or concerns. Bonnie?
I'd like other people to go first because I have a ton and I want other people to cover their thoughts first. So I will wait.
Awesome. So I've got Leah in the chat. So I've promoted you to a panelist, so you can.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
I am not. I should not be on video right now. So, so I just wanted to say that since Lindsay can't be here tonight, that the CRB will be looking at. Let's see, the pepper ball policy will be part of the community impact case that will be reviewed this fall. I would say likely October or November. So just wanted to let you all know that that's going to be something that CRB is looking at as far as uses of pepper balls and whether they complied with the policy that's in front of you now. And that's really what I wanted to point out.
I had one question going into that, in that they will be using this policy. So if we do decide to make changes, officers won't be judged based on the changes we make. It'll be judged based on the current one. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. And more specifically, the one that was in place, the community impact case focuses on the weekend of May 29th. Mm-hmm. So obviously this old one was in use then. Okay.
Thank you so much.
No problem. And I'm around if you have other questions.
I'll just leave you as a panelist so you can unmute.
Actually, the question that I have is that community impact case brought up by an individual or by a group of individuals?
We received so many community complaints, some firsthand, some thirdhand, some people who were directly involved, some people who just saw what happened and were concerned. And we decided that, and I've been here for 10 years and I haven't seen that level of community interest in one series of police involvements or contacts, I guess. So we thought it seemed to meet the standard for community impact case, and so did the CRB. Does that answer your question, Silver, or
Yes.
do you?
Mhm.
Okay, all right.
Clarification.
So I saw Dallas first, and then Alan, and then we'll come to you, Bonnie.
I just want to get clarification of what I just heard. So what we're going over now, dealing with the pepper ball, it'll be gone over again by the CRV in May 29th. Is that what I just heard?
So
Sorry, go ahead, Sean. Sorry.
I was going to say, so we use the CRB uses these policies to judge individual, like specific incidents of police conduct, and judge whether the police acted within the policy or outside of the policy. So we're setting up the rules by which they're judged later on, basically.
Okay.
Would you say that's accurate, Leah?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's almost exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
But they don't change policy.
Right.
They use the existing
Thank you.
policy.
Thank you, Silvio. That's I think that's what I meant.
Excellent. So let's go to Alan and then Bonnie.
Oh, maybe Leah, you could explain how a community impact case gets determined, because it's not brought forward by a citizen, it's determined by the police auditor and the CRB. Maybe you can explain
Right.
that process a little bit.
Sure. So there's a specific section of the ordinance that looks at something called community impact cases. So typically the Civilian Review Board will look at closed internal affairs investigations. And then a community impact case is something where our office has gotten a lot of interest, or CRB members have a lot of interest, and sort of as a team, the auditor and the CRB decide that something has impacted the community enough that it needs to be looked at in a different way. Sorry, I'm on a walk. The main difference in a community impact case is that the CRB will get to have input on whether it should be closed or whether additional investigation needs to happen, whether they agree with where the chief is adjudicating it. So basically the CRB gets input before it's closed, where on a typical case, they review something that is already closed.
Did you have your own question, Alan, or was that it?
No, that was it. I just needed people to understand it a little better.
Thank you so much. All right, Bonnie. And then Jennifer.
I went through the whole policy in order, and I have a lot of questions before this question. However, I'm going to ask this anyway because I feel like it's one of the more important ones. So give me a second. Sorry, I lost my spot in the questions I had. Oh, okay. So under policy 804, B number 4. Can one of you please explain this policy a little bit more? I have some questions specifically for it, but can you kind of address like how this makes officers be safe?
I can hardly understand what she's saying. Is it muddled or something?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Here, 1 second. Thank you so much for asking me. Okay, so under section 804.2 B, number 4, it talks about being able to use the projectiles to shoot down lights or cameras or other physical objects. And I wanted to know how it is that keeps officers safe shooting cameras or lights, for example.
Yeah, I can give some insight into that. This is going to be situations where we've got like a person barricaded inside a residence, and if we've got, so you go from a daytime event into a nighttime event, or it's just a middle of the night incident, and you need to be able to have the cover of darkness for officers to be less visible so that they can move, get set up behind cover in other places without being able to be seen by a suspect if we've got somebody that's dangerous. The same thing for cameras. Somebody could be safely barricaded in their home watching everything that we're doing through cameras, and having that, minimizing their ability to see our movements, and the way we're set up provides greater safety for our officers. And so that's going to be the general time where that's going to be used. The pepper ball, the reason that we specifically want to be able to use pepper ball for that is that the inert pepper ball rounds cost pennies, and what we have traditionally used in the past to do that job cost in the realm of $30 to $40 a piece. And I can tell you that I was on a call once long ago where we had a dangerous guy barricaded inside an apartment, had cameras in the second story. We didn't have very good cover, and I bet you we shot 15, maybe 20 to 25 of those $30 to $40 rounds in order to disable the cameras so that we could have greater cover to maintain our safety. And so that's specifically why the pepper ball is a good tool for that, as opposed to some of the other items that we have.
Chris Rock's bullet.
What's that, Silver?
The Chris Rock bullet. You make a $500 bullet. You're not going to be using them as sparingly as you do. What type of round are used? That's or as costly as you mentioned.
The 40 millimeter sponge rounds, which are a less lethal impact weapon, or what are, it used to be the beanbag shotgun rounds, but we've gone away from those because they are more dangerous and do cause more injury. So we've gone to the 40 millimeter sponge round, which has a much bigger foam tip that disperses the energy. So it's still a pain compliance impact weapon, but it's less likely to cause injury.
So, yeah, you had a couple comments, Bonnie?
Yeah, just a question. So is there any way to, in the language, actually, I don't want to limit, well, I do want to limit the ability to use that. Okay, no. I just want it so that this language can't be misinterpreted to be read as, oh, as an officer, I read through this list and I felt like I could shoot into like a protest group and they had cameras and so I shot them and technically I'm allowed to do that and so I did that. Like, is there a way to change the language so that it kind of addresses that, so that because I feel like it kind of leaves it open. Like, I know I feel like it's very general in the way that it talks about it, and I feel like it does allow me to feel like I could possibly, if I were an officer, shoot a camera that somebody is holding. And maybe you're just trained not to, but the language makes me feel uncomfortable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting, because I wouldn't have ever come up with that. That's why we like having people here to review policies and look at things from a different lens. The problem with that is that there isn't a problem with adding the language. The problem with, from our perspective about your concern, is that anytime you shoot something at somebody or towards somebody, there's a risk of them getting injured. And so regardless of whether you were doing it for this purpose, there's going to be a problem. If you're doing it for that purpose, then you're putting somebody in danger unnecessarily, and that's going to be unacceptable. So it's a funny rabbit's trail that kind of gets us around to why our officers would not use it in that purpose, specifically for that sole purpose. And certainly is not how it would be trained to be used. I mean, that's, we could certainly think about some language that would make it clear for the public to know what our purpose is.
Physical mounted.
I don't see, and when you meld the rest of our policies together and you look at the bigger picture, it wouldn't even cross my mind that would be an acceptable use when you look at the totality of all of our use of force policies and the way we do things. But it's certainly possible we could look at a way of trying to clarify that.
If we added the word mounted, that would be more clear. And I understand.
Drones as well.
Yeah.
Might be legitimate.
What about?
So I've got Alan, Bonnie, Jennifer, myself, and V all on the queue. I do like what Bonnie's saying. I think there are solutions to it. If you don't have a comment specifically on this topic, are you okay with us delaying it for comments that are specifically on this topic?
Mine's on this topic.
Okay, so let's do Alan then.
So it says, as necessary to make a scene safer for officers. So shooting out a camera in a protest doesn't make it, I would say, isn't meeting this policy. It doesn't make it any safer for the officers to not be filmed or recorded. Sorry, show my age. And so maybe there's a way to tweak that to, that's I think the operative part. The part that Kyle was getting at is that this is pretty limited use, and it's when it's necessary to make the scene safer. And just driving by a protest and shooting out cameras, I think would violate this policy. And maybe there's a way to say that, or are there interpretations of policy, Kyle, that we what the meaning is that we use in policies like this?
Can you repeat the question, Alan? I'm not sure I tracked exactly.
So the as necessary to make the scene safer for officers is intended to make it the example that you gave about, a bad guy who's dangerous and he's watching all the officers wander around his house as they're doing, making the scene safe. And so I think that's the operative part of this. And just shooting out a camera that someone's using in a protest would violate this policy. That wouldn't be make the scene safer. And so are there interpretations that we apply to these rules that to the policies that enhance our understanding about it other than what's just written? So like you gave the example. So if we just say, and what that means is blah, blah, blah.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say, as you were talking about that, I think you're totally on that. An officer would have quite an explanation to give out how they're making a scene safer by trying to shoot a camera out of somebody's hand. It certainly would be very easy to just put a couple of examples that would help set your mindset towards the direction, like exterior lighting at a barricaded subject or cameras at a residence or building or business or something. I mean, it certainly we could add those examples, but I think you're right on that. Having to get over the bridge of how your actions created the scene safer is what sets the tone for what the expectation is, and how you're going to articulate it at the end of the day.
I've got Jennifer on.
And maybe that would help with Bonnie.
And I'm not aware of any situation where that has happened, and that would be shocking to me.
I've got Jennifer, and then myself, and then V, and then Silver.
I don't think Bonnie's done.
No, she's not done.
So we're talking about specifically the 804.2B4. So I have a comment specifically on that as well.
Okay, so I want to be in the queue for just general, not for this specific subject.
Okay, so I will do that. So that's me. So can we add the words unaccompanied, disable unaccompanied lights, cameras, and other physical objects? Because if it is accompanied, then it's a use of force against a person anyway, and they'd have to obey the use of force guidelines.
Sounds good so far, initially anyway, by thinking about it, just off the top of my head. Oh, sorry. That sounds pretty good, just thinking about it off the top of my head as new information. Sounds good. Yeah. Unaccompanied.
I think it fits all the different pieces together. It makes it clear to officers, and ultimately they're going to be using use of force for any time they're shooting at a person, like Kyle was suggesting earlier.
Sorry, am I supposed to write this down, or who writes this down?
I
will write it down anyway, but how does it officially go somewhere?
So Kyle, we say this if Kyle disagrees, and we can have a motion to the effect and vote on it, but this seems pretty uncontroversial to me. What do you think, Kyle?
Yeah, I don't have any issue with that. We kind of go both ways between if the commission has a specific set of language that they would like to to put up a vote. Somebody makes a motion to have a specific set of language put in. Most of the time, we're all pretty flexible with this stuff, and so you all make some suggestions, and I figure out how to wordsmith your intent into cop lingo that our people will understand, but also is clear for the public to understand. And then we come back and usually you all are happy with what I come up with. Sometimes you aren't, and then we do it again.
Yeah. And we try not to spend too much time on wordsmithing, but this isn't an important enough distinction.
Can I say just one thing? Just one thing?
Yeah, sure. And then V and then Silver.
Real quick. And I've seen this before in my life, just in corporate America. If you don't like the verbiage or say whatever it is that we're talking about, then what is the verbiage that you would want to see? Because at least if we have that, then we have something to vote on versus what we're doing right now, we're trying to create. Or you're telling me that's what we normally do in these meetings?
Yeah, so normally all we can do as a body is recommend policy anyway. So yeah, I like both ways. Personally, I have seen it effectively used to suggest these things. Kyle's come back and we've then agreed to it or made minor word tweaks here and there. So this is stuff that we looked at before the 4 new folks have joined us. So a lot of this has already gone through a couple rounds of this. So it's just the minor tweaks here and there that we see.
So we do both, Dallas. We tell Kyle what the intent is and he comes back with specific language that then we approve, or you can make a motion to have specific language. So it's up, we use both methodology here.
Okay, so Kyle has listened to everything that Bonnie has said, and he's gonna come back to us with some different verbiage.
So this is the point at which he is coming back to us and we are tweaking the minor verbiage that we are concerned about. It's kind of weird because we're changing horses midstream, but I've got V next and then Silver and then Bonnie and then Chantel.
Okay, so I'm looking at the usage criteria section B, number 1, and it's saying should be used. And B.
One sec. So Silver, was yours specifically on section 4?
Yes.
V, is yours specifically on section 4, or can we put that in the general queue with Jennifer?
Looking at the pepperball policy, section B. I don't think that's section 4, is it?
No, so you're talking about B1, right?
B1, yes.
All right, so let's do Silver, and then Chantel, is yours on B4? Okay, then Silver, and then Bonnie, then Chantel, then V.
Not understanding, Sean. Are we still on A? Or we, I thought we
didn't have any questions on A. We've got.
Okay.
That was on B, on section B, and then number 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about B, number 1. Are you bumping me off, Sean? What is going on?
Yeah, so let's bump you after Jennifer. While we finish up this, unless the unaccompanied thing is enough to put this one to rest.
We're still on B4.
Yep. Silver, that makes it you.
Yep, thank you. So regarding B4, I would like some more specific verbiage because I think Councilor Dominguez does have a point that it could be used to sort of justify. And in spite of the fact that we haven't seen it happen, it's possible that it may occur, and that being the justification, oh, it made me feel safer to pepperball this camera is not mounted. I like the idea that we're going to move to a more specific language on this. And if you could shoot a drone with a pepperball, have at you.
Unfortunately, the FAA doesn't like that still, and there is no distinction between shooting down a $100 commercial little play drone and shooting down a Cessna airplane with 2 people in it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, so Bonnie, is this yours on B4?
Yes, so I just wanted to conclude that I wanted to include light in there. So just, I obviously considering that I don't think it's appropriate to shoot a laser into an officer's eyes. That's an inappropriate use of a light or a laser because it is photons. And, but also, so kind of including light in the language, but also addressing the concerns of an officer. Because a flashlight or a cell phone light being flashed at an officer shouldn't allow somebody to be able to shoot that off out of their face. Granted, I've also seen movies where lights will, if they're bright enough, they can make it so that you can't see what's going on, but then should you be shooting? I don't know if you should be shooting. And anyway, sorry, I digress. But also other physical objects, again, the language is very unspecific. So just if there's a way to somehow make it more specific, that would be really great. And thank you so much, because I know that wordsmithing is complex. So thank you, Brian.
So I'm getting the sense that we're going to have to come back and re-review this because we're going to have substantial enough changes.
Well, I don't know that we are. I am supportive of having the unaccompanied or unmounted or some word there, and I'll chew on what seems to cover everything the best. And I think adding some examples to help set our mind on what the focus of it is. I'm hesitant to not leave it open because we wind up dealing with weird things and you can't guess everything, which is why we put a few examples and then we leave it generally open, because you just, like everything in law enforcement, you just can't plan for it because we're not creative enough to come up with all the ways that all the problems that we wind up facing. So I'm a little hesitant to make the examples any more specific, but I am totally on board with clarifying that in ways that we're not talking about people holding things and that goes down a whole use of force piece. But again, we really do try to not become too specific because then your list is longer than the policy, and our policies wind up getting too complicated if we start all over the place. If we start putting specific yays and nays, it's better to build out what the expectation is and then allow people to apply that expectation in the thousands of unique situations that we find ourselves in. So that's what we try to do through policy.
So I've got Chantel on this one, and we're gonna, please go ahead, Chantel.
My comment's kind of quick. I was just gonna say, when I read it, the problem I had with it was like the transparency aspect, which I think is kind of like what Bonnie is getting at. Like it, especially in the age of where everybody wants to see everything, the chief was telling us how more things are gonna be recorded. I just think that's why we probably have an issue with the language, is because it doesn't seem that transparent. But then when you explained it and how it's used, then we kind of got it. So I think the community is also going to have those concerns if they were to read it.
Thank you. V on B4.
Yeah, actually, in all the numbers, the way that is, the should be, or in B4 is, maybe, they're suggestive. They're not, it's a policy. It shouldn't be suggestive. It should be, this is what you can do. This is what you can't do. And it seems like it's very, very suggestive instead of, for example, projectile will be used to disperse crowds, or, instead of should be or maybe. There's a huge distinction legally. If you look at legal definitions for these different terms, different verbs, they're very, very different, maybe so another example would be must. Must is very different than maybe or should be.
Yeah, I think the intent is to enumerate the allowable uses of these devices rather than prescribe how they will be used. So I think that's why maybe is used.
In some situation, it needs to be, a little less suggestive and more, mandated or mandatory. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but yeah.
Well, I can tell you that there is not a single may, shall, should, will, or must in any policy that isn't specifically that word for a reason. And that those are very important distinctions that we routinely discuss as we're writing policy and adjusting policy, because they absolutely do make a big change. I am hesitant to make anything in this policy more prescriptive, and I would kind of argue against this one, V, in that this is providing opportunity if it's the tool at the right time, and it isn't always. And so we're providing a tool in the toolbox, and it should be at the officer's discretion to be able to use it. And we're just giving a list of when this is allowable, may be used. It may be, not that it should be or has to be or is the only way to do something. We disable lights with our batons, and we disable lights with our hands. I've unscrewed many a light bulb in this same circumstance, so we're not just willy-nilly shooting out lights. If we can do it without breaking any damage, then we'll do it that way if we can do so safely. So I'm a little hesitant with that, going down the road of being more directive with this and leaving it more as an option. And that's really where the may comes in, is it creates it as an option.
Yeah, I can understand that, Kyle, and I understand about the discretion because, as Chief said earlier, the chokehold is not, the policy is not part of the training anymore. But when you're in a street fight, that might need to come into play. But when you have a policy, for example, the number 1 section B, you look at pepper ball projectiles should be used at a distance. Suddenly, the police officer may not be using it at a distance and at close range and injuring a suspect or a crowd. Then we have an issue, with.
So actually, that's a great segue, V. And since we are talking a little bit about the meanings of the words and how they work from our perspective. In police policy, and this is for everybody just because we do have new folks, there is, can never say never, and you can never say always. And shall does mean this is what you are expected to do. This is how it's supposed to be done. If we have a policy or a line that says you shall do something, then the expectation in 99.999% of circumstances is that that's what you're going to do. When we say should, it means that you've got to have a really good reason if you don't do it that way. The expectation is that you do this, but if you have an articulable means or reason or necessity to do it differently, that you're going to be held to a standard to explain why you didn't. It's difficult because, again, we can't regulate through policy the vast different situations that we find ourselves in. And so we're very, very careful about picking when we use shall, should, and may. And I actually try to limit and avoid must and will in order to maintain consistency in our policies, that we lean towards specific words. But even a policy that says shall doesn't mean that that's always going to be the case. And there are times when people can articulate that they had to do something differently. And so that's where there may be a circumstance. You have a deadly force situation and the pepper ball is the tool that you have in your hand. Then maybe you're not shooting it within the range of the policy. But if you've got an articulable justification for it, then you're still okay.
And it's important to remember that these are tools used by the Civilian Review Board to judge specific situations and by officers to understand what their expectations are. So I think as we are transitioning off of specifically B4, I had Jennifer on the queue and then V and then Bonnie again. And then, sorry, I had Silver before Bonnie.
I wanted to say one thing real quick, Kyle, is that the Supreme Court actually ruled that shall is actually not prescriptive. So I looked that up. You know, it's not something I came up with. Yeah, just wanted to let you know that that's changed. Shall is no longer the same as must.
Interesting. Okay.
So, Jennifer?
Yeah, thank you. So Kyle, maybe this is my misunderstanding, but when I read through this, I really like the section with the post-usage procedures and how they really make it clear that we need to be providing aftercare and medical care. But then I'm wondering, is it implied in here, or did I just miss it somewhere, that you can't be shooting these things at people who are like leaving an area, where then you would have no ability to check on them later? Or is that just not a use that would be? Because I mean, if we're expected to aftercare them and they're leaving the scene and you're shooting pepper balls at them, you can't really do both. So I'm wondering if that's
or if you shoot them and then they leave.
I think that's if yes, it says fairly definitively that we should be providing aftercare. I think we're in a situation. It's difficult to do that in all circumstances, and this tool specifically is a little bit unique in the way it can be used. And so maybe that needs to be more clearly, if possible, when some additional qualifying in there, because there are going to be circumstances where that's going to be difficult to do. Now, if somebody is negatively affected to a point where they're disabled, or they're requesting care, or they need medical care for whatever reason, then I think that language there follows up that expectation that we're going to provide that follow-up care for someone who needs it.
Well, I guess my question is, the way I read the justification of using this is when you have a group of people and you're wanting them to just not be there anymore, disperse in some manner. So is it appropriate to be shooting at people that are leaving a scene at all? And if not, should we say that?
I am not a pepper ball expert. My understanding and knowledge of it is that it is generally a fairly innocuous, short duration acting irritant that by and large people are irritated by it, and then it clears rather quickly, and that medical care is not absolutely required, as it is at a level like somebody that gets tased, where there is internal physical stuff that can be negatively impacted, and we want to make sure that they get looked at. And so I don't believe that medical follow-up or aftercare is absolutely required or needs to be absolutely required, unless somebody's exhibiting those symptoms or is having a problem, or there's something more to go along with it. And so we always want our officers to provide and make sure that people are getting any sort of medical care, especially when we've used force on them in some way. But you're absolutely right that in a crowd dispersal situation, we're not going to be able to be providing aftercare, and so that's a kind of a complication in our policy where we may not be able to be in compliance with that section in that purpose.
It might also be a place to enumerate it in when we talk about the riot response, not to continue to use force against people who are already dispersing. Because this will follow mostly that riot response overarching policy.
Okay, maybe it's better to look in that. Thanks, John.
Right, because it says may be used to disperse crowds. If they're already dispersing, then you'd be violating this policy, right, Kyle?
Yeah. Again, unless there's some more unusual circumstance that's outside the norm. But yeah, unless there's a higher articulated explanation, or there's something more to the story. If the crowd's already dispersing, then you wouldn't be using this tool to do that.
I've got Silver, Bonnie, and then Amanda. And I also want to say we are vastly outstripping our time. So I would like to take a look at handcuffing, control holds, and impact weapons at a later date in order to allow us to accurately review the pepper ball policy and fully review it. Can I get a motion to that effect?
I will move the handcuffing, is that
Meeting.
policy number 808 to the next meeting?
Second.
Everybody in favor, say aye or wave your hand. Anybody opposed? All right, unanimous. Thank you all. And next up, I've got Silver.
So I've seen enough David Fincher movies and projects to know that there are bad guys out there. And I know that pepper balls don't necessarily deal with individual subjects. So I'm going to respectfully ask that no one else on the panel answer this, but Sergeant Williams or Officer Tester, if you'd like, answer to me, what is the right time for pepper balls to be deployed?
Let me clarify your question. You're saying that you do understand that there are bad people out there, but wondering when the right time, what a good situation or the right situation is for the use of pepper ball?
It seems to me that pepper balls are specifically for protests or what have been deemed riots that stem from protests.
No, I think that it's been thrust into the spotlight out of recent events where protest activity, where rioting has occurred. And that gray area between peaceful protesting and rioting, because it definitely is it's a transition that isn't just always a cut and dry, open a door, close the door. As the policy allows, I think it is between the inert rounds for disabling cameras, blowing out lights, to breaking windows in order to allow us to gain access into a residence that's been barricaded. Someone who's armed with a knife. We had a call recently where we had officers contact an individual who was suffering from a mental health episode and had been armed with a knife. And so the pepper ball was deployed on that. It wasn't used, but it was out and ready as yet another less lethal force option to try to avoid the use of deadly force. So it's a tool that can be used quite a bit when we're dealing with our daily stuff. Anytime that we would use an impact weapon, and we can utilize distance to our advantage. This is a tool where we can reach out from a distance, so we don't have to be as close as we do for a taser or for pepper spray, where the closer we are, the higher risk there is of somebody getting injured. If we've got a scenario where we've got a dispute, say a transient camp, and people are hearing screaming and shouting and fighting, and we're going in semi-blind into a wooded area or whatever. It's yet another tool where we can be more cautious with our approach and be able to intervene into what could be a dangerous situation from a distance. Throwing an irritant into the area, oftentimes we're not actually shooting people with them, we're shooting the ground or around them to cause the powder to become airborne in order to cause the irritant to occur. Typically, we're not using this as an impact weapon. It's about getting the pepper powder into the air around people. Most of the riot or protest applications, the pepper ball is actually being shot at the ground at people's feet in order to cause that pepper cloud to come up and irritate them and cause them to change their behavior, go someplace else, be distracted, unable to continue doing what they're doing. So. There are a lot of uses for pepper ball as a way of allowing us to have one more tool where we don't have to dive in and get close and go hands-on with a very, very, very safe but very irritating substance that can help calm the situation down or divert people's attention from whatever bad thing it is that they're doing.
And I've seen that, the bursts on the ground. I've seen the direct aims at the grounds. But you said we want to be able to deploy this at the right time. So it's not just being used in those protests or riots. It's actually deployed quite often, what you're telling us.
I don't know how often exactly because I'm not on the street, but it is a tool that is that has a time and a place. And it's good to have those tools out there for when it is the right time and place. This policy actually was pushed by the SWAT team. It was early on a couple of years ago. We were talking about bringing back our rapid response team or a field force team, and this is a tool that's relied on for mobile field force or riot control. But that didn't materialize, and it was actually the SWAT team that brought it forward because they wanted to be able to use it for less lethal means, for breaking out windows and lights, and they wanted another tool that didn't involve heavy gas and guns and other more forceful measures. And so that's where this policy actually came from, was the SWAT team wanting to deploy it as another tool in their tool bag.
Thank you.
Did I miss anything, Basha? Yeah, go ahead.
I'll kind of just chime in on that as well. As far as patrol goes, I haven't seen them out there. It's more so once the SWAT level has been activated is when we start seeing the pepper balls even deployed. So, and deployed meaning just, on an officer. It's not necessarily actually, firing or anything like that, but just the deployment of it is typically when we've reached that SWAT level component of an incident.
So,
well, and I could be wrong, but I would bet that we only have a half dozen to a dozen people even trained on it. So
that's what I was.
Patrol was not trained on pepper balls. So
Yeah, and the policy states very clearly that it's only for individuals who have been trained on the use of.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
yeah.
Every tool that we carry, we have to be trained on before we can even carry it, and it's thorough training for each of our deployments.
Thank you all. I've got Amanda, then Bonnie, then V, and we're gonna have to wrap it up real quick.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to talk specifically about, I lost it. Where is it? 3B, but I mean, I guess the policy in general. So I may have forgotten to update you on this, but back in July, Human Rights Commission voted to send a resolution to City Council recommending against the use of pepper balls for crowd control or crowd dispersement. And that was unanimously voted through by Human Rights Commission. So, and I am trying to track that down. I'm struggling to track it down right now. In the age of everything being electronic, it's a lot easier to lose track of documents. So if I find that, maybe I could send it to Sean or Jeremy and that could go to the rest of the group. Okay, I'll work on that. But my question specifically was, I know the ACLU and other groups recommend against the use of pepper balls for crowd control, crowd dispersement. So I was just curious what sort of review of those types of recommendations and best practices and sort of data gathering has happened around continuing to use this for crowd control. I think especially in light of the, we received just a huge amount of feedback over the summer about the use of these for crowd control for some of the events that happened. So that is my question.
Yeah, I know that those recommendations are out there, and my question to the police commission would be that what tools should we be using for crowd dispersal, and when the time comes that there's an unruly crowd that we do need to break up, what other tools do we have? If we don't have, and I'm posing this as a very serious question, if we don't have CS gas, smoke, pepper ball, pepper spray, what tools do we have? And if we don't have any tools to do that job, then how do we expect our officers to be out there when these things turn violent? And what is our expectation of our officers then at that point? If we don't have tools for them to do their job, then how do we do that? So I think it's a challenging question, and certainly begs that every one of our force options we should be evaluating. But
I mean, I guess that's my question to you though. Like, what is the police force doing to research that and find what are those best practices for crowd control? So I guess, I mean, that's kind of what I'm asking you.
Yeah, I would tell you that the general consensus is that we are following best practices among law enforcement around the country. And that while people don't like the force tools that we have, these are the tools that we have, and it is what's available to us. And generally speaking, by and large, we are using them consistently with best practices and within the legal authority provided to us by the legislature and through policymaking bodies like this.
So I've got Bonnie and then V and then Macy or Dallas. You haven't been super talkative. If you want to say anything, we got time for you as well.
I'm sorry, can I go first? I lost track because there's so many good comments that I lost track of what I was going to ask.
B.
Yeah, so Kyle, I was wondering if, how effective are these pepperball projectiles in different weather conditions, when it's raining, when it's windy? Are they still pretty reliable as far as the effect that, you know, they are intended to be?
Yeah, that's my understanding. And pepperball is not intended to be a long-acting. It's designed to target a specific place for a short period of time. It's not designed to be there for a long time. So even if there's wind or other things, it's still going to be maybe mitigated a little bit, maybe less effective, but still going to be effective. And if it's not effective, then we're going to switch to a different tool or try to. So
that segues into my other part of my question is when you're shooting at, you know, lights and or cameras, and there's a strong gush of wind, you know, with the pepper, you know, then I mean in the chemical anyway, would it be airborne and flown onto unexpected places where people who are not, you know, intended to be used against or ended up, you know, having this chemical on them?
So we would use inert rounds that don't have pepper powder in them for those circumstances. Yeah, so there wouldn't be anything. There wouldn't be any sort of an irritant. And I don't know if those have a powder in them or if it's just the shell. I'm not entirely sure about how the inerts work.
It's just a shell.
It is just a shell.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Bonnie.
You're muted.
Oh, sorry.
No, you got it.
Ready, sorry, thank you. Macy?
We can hear you now. Nope.
Oh, I'm saying, can I go last, please?
I believe you are. Unless...
Oh, I am? Oh, I thought Macy was going to say something.
Okay, so Macy, Alan, and then Bonnie, and then we have to wrap it up and move on to vice chair elections.
Okay. So I've been really thinking about section C of the policy under usage per procedures, number 7, which talks about how any information known about a person's pre-existing medical or physical conditions. And so I just want to know, how do police officers gain the information for that, and then what alternatives are used to ensure that a person who is dealing with pre-existing medical or physical conditions are not further harmed in this type of situation.
Yeah, so this is again one of those where when you look at it from the riot or protest angle, it's like, well, how would you ever know? And that section that really doesn't apply in that scenario because we're not going to have that kind of information. Where that comes into play is going to be like the call that we had recently, where we had the person with the mental illness and he was barricaded inside the home, and parents were there, and we were able to talk to them about his history and that sort of thing. So there are situations where we're dealing with a specific individual, and at times we do gather that information from friends or family or the folks that have called us, and that we always want to take that into consideration. And so if they do have a respiratory problem, or if they're in some sort of an episode where they're having a respiratory distress already that we can tell, or somebody's telling us, then we would want to try to use a tool that doesn't impact that negatively. And it takes away our options. And so if the pepper ball is the best option, but for whatever reason, it has the potential of causing additional harm to that person, then we're going to find a different tool, and hopefully the one with the least amount of force. But that's where we have strength in numbers. So that may be one where we try to gather as many or more officers than maybe we would have, so that we could overpower someone. Again, depending on what weapons or what the circumstances may be, to the use of the taser, to a 40 millimeter sponge round. That's just the impact weapon that we can shoot at people. It's a foam tip. So we would utilize another tool potentially if there's a medical condition that could be exacerbated in the circumstances where we know that. And we include that kind of language in several of our use of force policies, like the taser, as well, where it talks about if you know about a medical issue, that the use of that should be avoided.
Right, and along those lines, the other question is, so do the officers have specific training about what certain physical and mental disabilities look like, so they are more prepared when that type of call comes in, to not have the pepper ball as like an option?
Well, I would say from the mental health standpoint, we have our crisis intervention training that talks a lot about mental health and interacting with folks in mental health crises. We are not heavily trained in medical, as that's not our primary job. And so I would say that that's something where we need to rely on people using common sense, and we're looking at a blunt instrument, not a precision tool. And if there's any indication of a problem, that we use our people to use their best judgment. But no, I would say that we're not highly trained in all the different medical ailments that could be exacerbated by any number of our tools. I would say we're given some basic training at a reasonable level to be able to evaluate that and try to make those decisions on the fly.
Is there a way to amp up that type of training to be able to identify what symptoms look like, so that the responding officers are not caught off guard, like with what they're seeing, like in dealing with?
I think Navasha had something to add there too that might add some clarity, and maybe more clarity on more recent training than me, being 5 years sitting in an office. So
whenever we do have a weapon that we're being trained on, some of those things do come up, and I would argue that we're not going to know everything, but we do kind of get a basic level of training with each weapon that we're used for in regards to who we're interacting with. A lot of times, the first thing you want to try and do is try and talk to the person, and just through talking to them and actually trying to figure out ask them, like, are you having that day, or what's going on, or just simply asking them about their symptoms. If they're willing to tell us, that's super incredibly helpful for us. But at the same time, also understanding that sometimes these situations happen within a half second. But if there's that time to sit there and actually talk about it and figure out what's going on, there's a lot of information gathering at a scene. And again, everything's different, but kind of going to the barricaded subject, for instance, we're able to gather a lot of information about the person that is barricaded. And a lot of times that information helps us as to what use of force we consider using, if that makes any sense.
It does, thank you.
I can also keep it in mind as we explore future agenda items, because it sounds like it affects many, many policies. So it's a perfect topic for deeper exploration.
Thank you.
Of course. So I've got Alan, and then Bonnie, and then we'll move to the vice chair election.
I get one question, maybe Amanda, if you haven't found it, but as I recall, the HRC recommendation, and I can't remember because it was a while ago, there's been a lot of stuff happening since and everything's kind of a blur. But if I recall, it was just a blanket use or a blanket ban, and it didn't address, so what do they use instead, which is the question that Kyle asked. So maybe we could get some more information on that. The question I had was, Kyle, just for the reporting part on D 4 and 5. So it gets reported if it's used on an individual in the blue team report, but if it's crowd, then it's incident report, police reports. And the rationale behind the distinction there is that if it's used on an individual, it's a direct use of force.
Yeah, Alan, that's a good question. I didn't specifically create that language. That was honestly, that may have been from the original policy from long ago. Well, no, because we wouldn't have blue team then. So there's some level of wordsmithing that's happened there. I think you're onto it, that when we're reporting it as a use of force, there has to be somebody specifically that in order to capture that data. That when it's used as an intentional use of force on a person is different than when we're firing it onto the ground into a crowd. And so we need to document it both ways, but the way that we collect data or collect the statistics and monitor it are a little bit different. And it's likely that is going to be changing across some broader info as well, or some broader changes that we're looking at. So I think the reporting piece is going to look a little bit different anyway. As the chief alluded to, with where we're even going to be starting to take info data on shows of force or displays of force, and I've got some language worked up that I'm sure we'll put in front of you guys about pointing an object with the intent to gain compliance as being the bar that we're looking at for shows of force, as we've had a lot of discussion about how you rein in and gather the data that we're interested in without overreaching and creating a significant workload with reporting everything. So I think that part's going to change a little bit, and so that's certainly a section that we're going to have to keep looking at as we move forward the next few months, and probably sooner than later, because I know the force reporting stuff is coming pretty hard and fast for trying to get that implemented. So
yeah, the one I thought of was if you're using it for crowd dispersal, but you hit someone and it's an individual, then where does that fall?
Well, I think that would still fall under the crowd dispersal. Yeah, because
if it
we're
hurt
not
them.
What's that?
Even if it hurt them.
Well, we probably wouldn't know that unless they came to us, and then again, that would be one of those unique circumstances where we would evaluate it and have to use our best judgment, and then be able to articulate why we did it the way we did it, and then that would be evaluated by our backup systems or critical review processes.
Next up, I've got Bonnie.
So I just have a couple comments. And one question. So first comment is if, and this is back to what Jennifer was talking about, if an officer is required to check to see if somebody's okay afterwards, or if they need any kind of care, I don't feel like that's really the job of an officer necessarily, and I don't think that they would necessarily be trusted in the sense, like if you just got shot by an officer, you're not necessarily gonna, like if they're getting close to you, you're probably not gonna feel comfortable having them provide care or something. So I just wanted to say that. And so, and again, I bring up cahoots again, having very limited knowledge, and I will not have less, I mean, I'll have more knowledge next time when we meet about what cahoots does, but it feels like that's something that they should be kind of in there for, because they are dressed in a certain way that doesn't indicate that they were also the shooters. So with that comment, and then my other comment is in one of the sections, section B, number 5, it says that a aggressive animal can be shot with one of these projectiles, and I just wanted to say that I think that it should be an aggressive at-large animal to be more in sync with the Eugene policy on dogs. Like if it's in a, because dogs can get aggressive if they get scared, so I don't think that they should be shot, but if they are at large, then, I mean, I'm not saying shoot dogs, but I guess maybe yes. Because I don't really see, if it's under control but being aggressive, I don't think they should be shot. Other comment. And then my question is, why is it, or I don't fully understand how there isn't enough time to provide people with a warning to disperse. Like, when does that happen where you can't like use one of those horns and say, hey, everybody needs to disperse or you will be shot with these projectiles? Like, how is there not enough time for that? And you probably know of a situation, I just can't think of it.
I would say that the vast majority of the time warnings are given. The expectation, especially in crowd dispersals, that warnings are given. Sometimes that timeline is short, and that depends on the level of danger to the community and to the officers. So warnings are going to be shorter if we're having bricks and rocks and Molotov cocktails being thrown at the officers, as we've seen up and down the West Coast. Or all over the country, as opposed to you have an unruly crowd that's that needs to be broken up, that may be subject to crowd control munitions, but that it just depends on what the circumstances are. And it certainly could be that if a significant attack towards officers or towards the public or residents or whatever is significant enough that intervention is required immediately, that at times that has to happen. Or where a specific actor is getting ready to lob a weapon towards the officers, that an immediate response is not going to allow for a warning to take place. It's possible that at times there's police lines are formed in order to block or guard a specific location or block an intersection, and yet they're not at the point of using crowd control munitions, as such as the foam tip, sponge rounds, or the pepper ball. But again, if somebody specifically acts out in a way that is causing a danger to themselves or others, then certainly that tool, they may be subjected to munitions of a variety of types without a warning. But all of our force options all talk about providing warnings whenever possible, at all possible.
The sponge rounds you keep talking about, are they the rubber bullets that we keep seeing?
Yeah, I was writing a response, and then we got talking about something else. I wanted to pay attention, so I stopped. I have heard the rubber bullets thing thrown out there for a lot, and I think there's misconception about. I think it's used as a broad stroke for probably any number of different items. And I have wondered if people have thought, especially early on when they didn't know what pepper ball was, if they thought that those were rubber bullets. I think of rubber bullet as your typical like small round rubber bullet. So I don't know exactly with how frequently that term is used, because we don't use the 40 millimeter sponge rounds very often for crowd control. We generally try to only use that in order to help effect an arrest. So if we're specifically going after a specific person and we want to disable them temporarily or distract them while we prepare to make an arrest, that is very, 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 very rarely and heavily discouraged to be used for general crowd dispersal. It's just not the tool for that. And so the frequency that the rubber bullets term has been used, I think it's used to cover any number of things that people don't quite necessarily understand what tool they're using.
Could you give us, just as a council, as a commission, can you send us a photograph, maybe with a banana to scale, what the rounds you're talking about are?
Show and tell, Kyle.
Yeah.
We usually do, and we brought pepper balls to a meeting recently and handed them around and let everybody hold them and see them.
You didn't bring the dog, so.
I wasn't at that meeting.
Yeah.
So yeah, we certainly we can come up with a way of doing photo show and tell.
Excellent. Yeah, go ahead, Bonnie, and then we gotta move on unless there's anything else.
So I would really, I think that it would be used. I would really like to see something, and I don't know if it already exists because that would be a great idea. I'm thinking it's a great idea. If there was some sort of PDF or something that people can download, for example, protesters or something, and even counter protesters, where they can see clearly with like kind of an infographic what response they can expect from the police very clearly. It just like, kind of, well, I don't want to say that, but anyway, so for example, like expect this reaction if you are throwing cocktails. Like if you see that, if an officer sees that you're holding a cocktail Molotov or whatever, or however you pronounce that, expect to possibly be shot with a round to get rid of it or something, or kind of like, what is a good distance to be from an officer? Like what makes an officer uncomfortable? Like if you're like really up in their face, maybe you can expect this kind of retaliation. And if an officer, for example, retaliates in a way that isn't appropriate, then they also know that that isn't appropriate, something to be reported. But also, it kind of like, if it were to be informed by officers and the policies that they have, then with that, the public would know how to behave, and to also not be surprised if their behavior is making it so that like they're being arrested or they're being shot at or anything like that. Does that make sense?
I think that also fits pretty well with the role of the commission, and we might want, I think it deserves more than a 30-second answer from Kyle, frankly. So we might want to bring that, but include that in the future agenda as well.
Okay. I move that to a different date, or however you say that.
Excellent.
Can I say something?
I'll just do it.
But I also want to make sure that we're aware that the police commission can orchestrate the behavior of the police, but this commission cannot orchestrate the behavior of the protesters.
No. And I'm aware of that.
There's not a playbook that they're going by where saying, well, here is our rules.
Mm-hmm.
So I think so putting too much of a vice often on the police sometimes, this commissioner's opinion, it's sometimes you're taking it overboard because you're taking the assumptive that this is a 100% by the book peaceful protest of what you cannot do, and that's not what I've seen necessarily with my eyes lately.
So I think.
We're trying to make it be a deterrent, Bonnie, so that people would see if they were going to do this, they would be forced with, they would see this.
Yes, exactly. I want them to kind of take responsibility for their own actions and see it's just like, okay, so you can expect this reaction. If you are behaving in this negative way, this is a very visual way, because not everybody's going to look through the policy, the police procedures and policies. People don't read terms and conditions for things that they really want, like to watch Netflix or something. So they're not going to read this either. So I feel like if you make it very graphic, then people will kind of be more inclined. It's something that they can share with each other. I've seen a lot of different protest rules and stuff be sent and passed around. And I think that this would be something that would also be passed around, just like, this is what you can expect. And this is what's proper and this is what's improper. I think but this is just me thinking internally that it would work.
Going back to my opening comment about the incident near my house, crowds often escalate situations, like Bonnie was alluding to. So helping them, giving them resources to understand how police will respond to escalation by the crowd, I think is one of the benefits that something like this might have. Jennifer, last comment, and then we'll move to vice chair election.
Actually, I have a question for Bonnie. I think maybe a bigger issue that you're talking about is making the policy more user friendly for the community. And how, and I don't know what role the commission could play in that, but she's right. Who's going to go through and read police policy? So, you know, that might be something for us to definitely think about.
100%. Cool. So as far as future priorities, I've heard a few. I'm going to run through this real quick. Just in this meeting, I've got training on identifying medical conditions and how to make the police policy more user-friendly and have some of the infographics on that. And then I've got the Citizens Police Academy from our orientation meeting as 3 things that are sort of part of the developing conversation and future priorities. State Senator James Manning will be joining us in November, is the plan, to talk about some of the stuff they're doing at the state level as well. That's more informational because we obviously don't work at that level, but you know, we are affected by those rules. So that's the other thing that we've got coming up. Moving on to vice chair election. Do we have anybody who would like to nominate or someone, including themselves, to be vice chair? Jennifer, and then V.
I was going to nominate V, but maybe he wants to nominate himself.
I'll take that as a nomination. V, did you still want to speak, or?
No, I just wanted to thank Jennifer for nominating me, and I think I really would like the opportunity to work with you, Sean, and in serving the board. And I do have a lot of time, so free time to work on things, you know, projects and whatnot. So I think it'll be an interesting gig for me. I hope you guys can support me on that.
Do we have any other nominations?
I was willing to step in, but V has something that I don't have, and that is time.
Free time? Yeah.
The pay doesn't go up.
It doubled. Mine doubled.
Yeah. It's still 0.
Awesome.
I have a question regarding Matt Seal's seat. So are we going to fill that?
Yeah. So we just did a huge round of interviews and stuff. I imagine the mayor will choose somebody who was one of the 6 runners up. And if anybody, including folks listening, have an opinion on who that should be, the mayor is the home of such suggestions right now, the proper avenue for that.
Why did Matt leave, by the way?
Family and busy is the reasons he gave us anyway.
That's the political answer.
Yeah. Jeremy?
The replacement will be on the consent calendar Monday. That's currently what, sorry, my little person's in the room.
That's awesome.
Only when you unmute.
Yeah, only when you unmute. Yeah, so it's on the consent calendar for Monday is currently the plan. So. Excellent. All right.
Excellent. So if that's the only nomination, then everybody in favor say aye.
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 Oh, did we get a motion?
Sorry,
Did we get a second?
Oh, no, we did not.
I'll second the motion.
Let's go with Dallas as the person seconding. Thank you, everybody, for stepping up, and thank you for joining me, Lee. Now, everybody in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much. Anybody opposed? Welcome to our new vice chair, V.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you, Sean.
Thanks.
I still haven't been paid my pizza coupon for the last week, Jeremy. I'm looking at you.
So let's move into closing comments now. If we want to start with Amanda, and then go to Chantel.
Oh goodness. I don't think I really have much in the way of closing comments. It's nice to see everybody. And I hope everybody stays safe and healthy and as stress-free as possible right now.
Thanks, Amanda. Chantel and then Macy.
I also just want to say it was nice seeing everyone and to stay safe. Please reach out if you guys need anything. After here, I'm going to go help out. It was nice seeing you guys.
Thanks, Chantel. Macy and then myself.
Hey, I don't have much for closing comments. I just hope that everybody stays safe. And if anybody has any donations or anything, I've been kind of doing couch coordinating from here. Personally working with the evacuees at Central Presbyterian Church. So I've been working with them. So if anyone needs anything, etc., don't hesitate to reach out because it's kind of my thing.
Excellent. I got myself and then Jennifer. For my comment, I want to thank Dallas specifically for talking about ways in which the things we talk about actually get implemented, because that's not something I'm always great at enumerating. So if folks do have strong attachments to specific language in the future, as we look at these, it was a really robust conversation, which I appreciate. And I'm so glad to have everybody on board. And feel free to come with specific language that you like as well. Not something I'd considered terribly deeply before, but I appreciate it. And then the last one is, Macy, your cat is adorable. And that's all for me. Jennifer and then Dallas.
Oh, it's hard to follow up on that one. I just wanted to appreciate this is our first full meeting with all of the new folks, and we did not start with an easy policy. So I appreciate everyone's willingness to listen, and I enjoyed the conversation, and I thought there were some really great points, and I'm just excited about this new group and excited to get the new person who I don't know because I haven't read my packet yet, Jeremy, so it'll be a surprise.
All right, Dallas and then V.
I don't have anything.
All right, thank you so much. V and then Bonnie.
Yeah, I've learned a lot, and I'm wondering. I stepped away for a second to run to the bathroom, so I don't know if we bumped the other policy we were going to review. We did.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Sorry, that was my question.
Next meeting.
Yeah, I underestimated the time it would take to review these.
Right. Yes.
We also elected you vice chair while you were gone. So.
Thank you. I owe you a pizza and all of you pizzas.
Bonnie and then Silver.
I have a question first. Is there a place to look at minutes or something? Is there somewhere we can review this, or is it just in video form?
So there is video form, and then Jeremy will come out with minutes or notes rather that we can review next time. The notes are not they're not the official public record. The video serves as the official public record because of its completeness.
And they're included in your packet for the next meeting.
Okay, cool. I liked hearing everybody's stories and what everybody's up to, so that's really cool. Everybody's so cool here, so I really appreciate working with you all. And I wanted to thank Navisha and Kyle for being so amenable to everything. Oh, that's it.
Thanks. Silver and then Alan. It's muted, Silver.
Dang it. You guys should have heard what I had to say. I think regarding specific police policies, there are some things that we do need to get in the weeds with. I mean, it's not like being the president of the United States. You can't just walk in and not know what you're doing. Kind of hope that everybody is going to take care of you. You know, I think this is, as it is a new policy, is something that doesn't have a lot of traction, doesn't have a lot of use with the EPD. It is something that we should be more attentive to. And I think specifically regarding strangleholds, chokeholds, the different policies that we'll be looking at the next time around, that's also something that I'm going to be quite passionate about. And I think we should really be considerate about moving forward with our policies on that and its regards to 21st century policing. That's it.
Thanks, Silver. I hope I haven't forgotten anybody. Alan, there we go. The screens moved around, so I wasn't sure.
Oh, I'd like to thank Silver for bringing Frankenstein to the meeting too, and V for also agreeing to and being nominated to be the Pepperball test subject. You did that while you were gone too. And did I hear the chief correctly that Kyle, you're going to be moving on? Are you leaving EPD, or did I miss something, or are you moving to another position?
Yeah, I'm intending to go back to patrol in January. So I'll be planning to vacate my policy, accreditation, and internal affairs position and back to being a good old-fashioned police sergeant, patrol sergeant.
Well, we'll miss you and your expertise that lends so much to the conversation. All right.
I'm hopeful that we'll get somebody even better.
Kind of doubt it, but
for the next stage of things, phase of things.
Good
the
luck.
chief did say 4 to 6 months, so I'm not entirely sure when. We'll see how that shakes out.
Sweet. Well, yeah, thank you all for joining us. And with that, the meeting is concluded. See you all soon. Bonnie, I might have an answer for your question about firefighter stuff as well. Do you want me to send you an email about that? You're muted. I can't hear you.